I'm Sophia, and my life used to feel like a quiet suburban dream, tucked away in a neat little house with a husband who once made my heart race. But somewhere along the way, the warmth faded, leaving me drowning in a silence so thick it suffocates. I thought I could live with the emptiness, until a single scarlet dress and a pair of eyes that truly saw me changed everything. Now, I'm tangled in a web of secrets and longing, torn between the life I've built and a forbidden pull I can't resist. What happens when the man I vowed to love forever uncovers the truth I've buried deep, and offers a solution that could shatter everything? Stick around, because my next move might just destroy it all. There's a certain kind of silence that creeps into a life, isn't there? Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like a heavy fog, wrapping around you until you're not sure where you end and the emptiness begins. I'm Sophia, 29 years old, and most days, I feel like I'm just a shadow drifting through my own story. I live in a tidy suburban home on the outskirts of Chicago, a place with manicured lawns and quiet streets that seem to hum with secrets no one dares to speak. My husband, Daniel, is 42, a corporate accountant who's always been the steady, dependable type. Once upon a time, our love burned bright, wild, consuming, the kind of thing you'd write songs about. But over the last 5 years, that fire has dwindled to ash. Now we're just two people sharing a roof, moving through the same spaces without really seeing each other. Our home is a snapshot of that disconnect. It's a 2-story house with pale blue siding and a little garden I used to tend to, but haven't touched in months. Inside, my cluttered home office is my sanctuary, or maybe my cage. I'm a freelance graphic designer, spending hours hunched over my laptop, creating logos and layouts for clients I'll never meet. The mess of papers, empty coffee mugs, and tangled cords mirrors the chaos in my head. Daniel, on the other hand, is always in his study downstairs, buried in spreadsheets until the early hours. When I walk past, I can see the glow of his laptop screen reflecting off his glasses, his brow furrowed in concentration. I'll say something mundane, like asking if he wants dinner, and he'll grunt a response without even glancing up. It's not anger or malice, just indifference. Our conversations, if you can call them that, revolve around the bare necessities. Who's picking up groceries when the electric bill is due? I've stopped trying to bridge the gap. Every attempt feels like shouting into a void, and I'm tired of hearing my own echo. There are moments, though, that cut deeper than the silence. Like when I'm cleaning up after dinner, and I catch myself staring at the old photos on the fridge. There's one from our honeymoon in Hawaii, both of us laughing on a beach at sunset, my arms wrapped around his neck, his hands on my waist. We look so alive, so in love. I can still feel the warmth of that sand under my feet, the way his breath felt against my ear as he whispered promises of forever. Now I wonder where that joy went. Did it slip away in the mundane grind of daily life? Or did we let it go, piece by piece, without even noticing? I don't have answers, just this ache in my chest that won't go away. I've started noticing things I didn't before too. Like Noah, Daniel's friend from their college days. He's 33, a freelance photographer with this effortless charm that seems to light up any room he's in. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, the dim light casting soft shadows across the room as I sifted through my closet, my fingers brushing against familiar fabrics with a kind of numbness I couldn't shake. I felt like I was going through the motions, picking out something to wear for this party Daniel had insisted we attend. His company was hosting it, some annual celebration of numbers and deals I didn't care to understand. My hand paused on a hanger tucked way in the back, pulling out a scarlet dress I'd bought on a whim years ago. I'd never worn it, never had the courage, I guess. But as I held it up, the bold, fiery color seemed to dare me. I slipped it on, the silky fabric hugging my curves in a way that felt almost foreign after so long of hiding in oversized sweaters and faded jeans. I turned to the mirror, and for the first time in ages, I saw a spark of something alive in my reflection. My heart quickened, a mix of hesitation and defiance swirling in my chest. Was this too much? Too bold for someone like me, who'd become so used to fading into the background? But then I squared my shoulders, deciding to wear it. Not for anyone else, but as a quiet rebellion against the invisibility I'd let myself sink into. At the party, held in a trendy downtown loft, the air buzzed with energy. Laughter spilled over the clink of glasses, and the thumping bass of the music pulsed through the sleek modern space, with its exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. People milled about, dressed in sharp suits and glittering dresses, their voices a cacophony of small talk and forced cheer. I stood near the edge of the room, a glass of wine in my hand, feeling like an outsider in my own skin. Daniel was across the loft, mingling with his colleagues, his laughter loud and performative as he slapped backs and shook hands. He hadn't even glanced my way since we'd arrived, not a word about the dress or how I looked. That familiar emptiness gnawed at me, sharper against the backdrop of all this forced festivity. Then the door opened, and Noah walked in. I noticed him immediately. How could I not? His tousled dark hair fell just right, and that easy smile of his seemed to pull the light toward him. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on me, he did a double take, his gaze lingering on the scarlet dress. My breath caught as he made his way over, weaving through the crowd with a casual confidence that made my stomach twist in a way I hadn't felt in years. We ended up near the bar, the noise of the party fading into a hum as he leaned in close, his voice warm and teasing. "That dress," he said with a playful smirk. "It's impossible to ignore. You're stealing the whole damn show." His words hit me like a jolt of electricity, waking something dormant inside me. I laughed, a real laugh, and felt my cheeks flush, a warmth spreading through me that I hadn't felt in so long. That moment at the party lingered in my mind for days, replaying like a song I couldn't get out of my head. I kept thinking about Noah's smile, the way his eyes seemed to see right through the walls I'd built around myself. So, when my phone buzzed a few days later with a text from him, my heart skipped a beat. It was casual at first, just a message about a design idea for his photography portfolio, asking if I could help with a layout. I typed back a quick reply, my fingers trembling a little, and before I knew it, our conversation shifted. It wasn't about work anymore. It was about us, little things, like how he loved the way I laughed at the party, or how I'd always seemed so untouchable to him. I found myself smiling at my screen, the glow of it lighting up my dim office as I sat there, feeling something I hadn't in years. Seen. Over the next few weeks, those texts turned into late-night phone calls. I'd wait until Daniel was asleep, his steady breathing echoing down the hall, before slipping into my office and shutting the door. Noah's voice on the other end was like a lifeline, pulling me out of the fog I'd been lost in. He was funny, cracking dry jokes about the mundane frustrations of freelance life, but he was also attentive, asking questions about my day, my dreams, things Daniel hadn't cared to know in ages. One night, his tone softened, and he admitted something that made my breath catch. He'd always noticed me, even back when Daniel first introduced us years ago, but he never dared say a word because of his loyalty to his friend. I hesitated, my heart pounding, before confessing my own truth. How lonely I'd felt, how I'd been carrying this weight of emptiness for so long, I'd almost forgotten what it was like to feel anything else. His silence after that felt heavy, but not uncomfortable, like he was holding space for my pain. Those calls became my secret, my escape, but with every word we shared, guilt started to creep in like a shadow. I'd delete our messages, clear the call logs, my hands shaking as I erased the evidence of something I couldn't quite name. But no matter how much I tried to bury it, I couldn't stop myself from craving more. Every notification, every late-night whisper, was a pull I didn't have the strength to resist. I knew I was crossing a line, even if it was just in words, in thoughts. I told myself it was harmless, that I wasn't doing anything wrong, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The tension inside me built until it reached a breaking point on a rainy evening, our 8th wedding anniversary. I'd planned a quiet dinner at home, wanting to reclaim something of what we used to have. I spent hours in the kitchen, the scent of roast chicken with rosemary filling the house, a meal I knew Daniel loved. I set the table with care, lighting candles that flickered softly in the dim light, their glow reflecting off the wine glasses I'd polished just for the occasion. I even put on a nice dress, hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd notice. But as the clock ticked past 7, my phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice clipped and distracted, saying he was stuck at work, some urgent deadline he couldn't get out of. I asked if he remembered what day it was, my voice trembling, but there was just a pause, a sigh, and then an apology that felt hollow. He'd forgotten. Completely. I hung up, standing there in the silent dining room, the rain tapping against the windows like a mournful drum. I sat down at the table alone, staring at the untouched food, the candles burning lower with every passing minute. Tears slipped down my cheeks, falling into the wine glass I hadn't even sipped from, the bitter taste of rejection mixing with the ache in my chest. In that moment of weakness, I did something I knew I shouldn't have. I called Noah. My voice cracked as I spoke, and he heard it immediately, the pain I couldn't. The days after that rainy anniversary night felt like walking on a tightrope, every step shaky, every breath a gamble. I was a wreck, torn apart by what had happened with Noah. My mind replayed every moment of that call, the way my vulnerability spilled out, and how he'd been there, his voice a soothing anchor in the storm of my emotions. But now, in the harsh light of day, shame clung to me like a second skin. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without seeing a stranger, someone who'd let things spiral into dangerous territory. Paranoia became my constant companion. Every creak of the house, every distant car engine, made me jump, my heart racing with the irrational fear that Daniel somehow knew. I'd catch myself staring at the front door, half expecting him to storm in with accusations I wouldn't be able to deny. My hands trembled as I went through the motions of daily life, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of guilt and dread. At first, I dodged Noah's calls. My phone would buzz, his name lighting up the screen, and I'd freeze, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. I told myself I needed space, needed to pull back before things went any further. But the silence between us gnawed at me just as much as the guilt did. After a few days, I caved. I answered one of his calls late at night, hiding in my cluttered office with the door shut tight. His voice was low, almost a whisper, like he knew the weight of what we were doing. "Sophia, I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, each word laced with a longing that sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to hang up, to cut this off before it consumed me entirely, but I couldn't. My own voice betrayed me, soft and uncertain, as I admitted I felt the same pull. Every conversation after that was tense, brief, like we were both teetering on the edge of something we couldn't control. Desire and dread warred inside me, a storm I couldn't escape, each word we exchanged tightening the knot in my chest. At home, I tried to act like nothing was wrong, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. It kept slipping through. I'd make breakfast for Daniel, flipping pancakes with a forced smile, asking about his day as if everything was fine. But my voice would quiver, a tiny crack he might not notice, but that felt deafening to me. He was quieter than usual, his responses short, almost clipped. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, his eyes lingering in a way that made my stomach twist into knots. Was it suspicion, or was I just projecting my own guilt onto him? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty ate at me. One evening, I was washing dishes, my hands moving on autopilot, when a plate slipped from my grip. It shattered on the tile floor with a crash that echoed through the silent kitchen. I froze, my breath hitching, as shards scattered around my feet. Daniel was sitting at the table, a stack of papers in front of him, and he didn't move. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable, before saying in a low, even tone, "We need to talk soon." My blood ran cold. What did he mean by that? Was it about us? About the distance that had grown between us? Or Did he know something more? I mumbled an apology, bending down to pick up the pieces, my hands shaking so badly I nearly cut myself. His words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken meaning. My thoughts spiraled after that. Did he suspect something? Had I left a clue somewhere, a forgotten text, a call log I hadn't erased? Or was it just my paranoia painting every look, every word with a sinister edge? I tried to confess so many times, the words clawing at my throat, desperate to be free. I'd stand in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, rehearsing what I'd say. Daniel, I've done something terrible. I need to tell you. But every time I got close, I'd choke on the fear of what would happen next. What if I'm sitting across from Daniel at a small, dimly lit restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the walls are lined with old black and white photos, and the air smells faintly of garlic and red wine? The murmur of other diners weaves through the space, a soft hum of conversations I can't quite make out, blending with the clink of silverware against plates. The lighting casts long shadows across our table, making the lines on Daniel's face seem deeper, more etched than usual. I swirl the glass of wine in my hand, the bitter taste lingering on my tongue as I take a sip, trying to steady the storm inside me. It's sharp, almost acrid, mirroring the dread that's been building in my chest all day. I've been dreading this moment since he said we needed to talk, that cryptic warning echoing in my mind like a drumbeat I can't escape. My fingers tighten around the stem of the glass, and I force myself to look at him, to meet his gaze, even though every instinct screams at me to run. I open my mouth, the words I've rehearsed 100 times clawing their way up my throat. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I need to... My voice stumbles, tripping over itself, a shaky mess of guilt and fear. But before I can get any further, he raises a hand, a sharp, deliberate gesture that cuts me off mid-sentence. His face is eerily composed, not a flicker of anger or surprise, just this unsettling calm that makes my stomach twist tighter. His eyes, though, they're piercing, locking onto mine with an intensity that pins me in place. I feel exposed, like he can see every secret I've tried to bury. Every late-night whisper I thought I'd hidden so well. Sophia, he says, his voice low and steady, each word measured like he's been waiting to say this for a long time. I've known about you and Noah for months, longer than you think, before anything escalated. My breath catches, a sharp gasp I can't hold back, as the world tilts under me. Months? Before anything even happened? My mind scrambles, trying to make sense of it, but his next words hit like a punch. I saw the texts on your phone, the ones you thought you'd deleted. I noticed the late nights, the way you'd slip away and come back with excuses that didn't add up. I've known all along. I'm frozen, my heart hammering so hard I'm sure he can hear it over the murmur of the restaurant. Horror washes over me, cold and suffocating, as I picture him piecing it together, watching me, silently observing every misstep, every stolen moment I thought was mine alone. Humiliation burns in my chest, hot and bitter, as I imagine him sitting in his study, that laptop glow on his face, knowing I was betraying him while I smiled and pretended everything was fine. How could I have been so careless? How could I not have seen that he was paying attention when I thought he'd stopped caring altogether? My hands tremble under the table, and I can barely breathe, the weight of his gaze crushing me. But he's not done. He leans forward slightly, his voice still unnervingly calm, like we're discussing the weather and not the unraveling of our marriage. I didn't say anything because I wanted to see how far you'd take it. I needed to know if you'd stop on your own, or if you'd keep going. There's no anger in his tone, no hurt, just this cold curiosity that chills me to the bone. I feel like a specimen under a microscope, dissected and analyzed while I was oblivious, living in my guilt-soaked bubble. My throat tightens, and I want to scream, to beg for forgiveness, to explain that I was lost, drowning in loneliness. But the words won't come. I'm drowning now, in shame, in the realization that he's been steps ahead of me this whole time. Then comes the bombshell, the one I never saw coming. He sits back, folding his hands on the table, and says, "I'm not asking for a divorce." The weeks following that shattering dinner with Daniel felt like wading through quicksand, every step heavier than the last. I was caught in a relentless tug of war between the guilt that gnawed at my bones and the lingering warmth of Noah's words, still echoing in my mind like a forbidden melody. Daniel's offer of an open marriage hung over me like a dark cloud, a twisted lifeline I didn't know if I could grab. Part of me was horrified by the idea, by the cold calculation in his voice when he suggested it, as if our vows were just a contract to be renegotiated. But another part, small and shameful, wondered if it could be a way out of the mess I'd made. A way to have both the stability of my life with Daniel and the electric pull I felt toward Noah. I hated myself for even considering it, for letting my thoughts wander down that path, but I couldn't stop. My heart was a battlefield, and I was losing ground every day. I barely slept in those weeks, my nights spent tossing in our too-big bed, the empty space beside me a constant reminder of how far apart Daniel and I had drifted. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, my fingers tracing the cool metal of my wedding ring, turning it over and over like it held answers I couldn't find. Was this piece of gold still a promise, or had it become a shackle? I'd think about Noah, about the way his voice softened when he spoke my name, the way he'd made me feel seen after years of fading into the background. Then I'd think of Daniel, of the life we'd built, the memories that still lingered in the corners of our home like ghosts. How could I have betrayed him so deeply? How could I have let myself fall into something I knew was wrong, even if it felt like the only thing keeping me alive? The breaking point came when I finally called Noah. I'd avoided him since that dinner, my phone a constant temptation I forced myself to ignore. But one gray afternoon, with rain streaking down the windows of my office, I couldn't hold back anymore. My hand shook as I dialed his number, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. When he answered, his voice was warm but cautious, like he could sense the storm brewing in me. I didn't waste time with small talk. The words poured out, raw and jagged, as I confessed everything. How Daniel had known all along, how he'd watched me unravel without saying a word, and how he'd offered a solution that made my skin crawl. Noah listened in silence, and when I finally stopped, my breath ragged, he let out a long, heavy sigh. "Sophia," he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite name, "I've fallen for you. Hard. Harder than I ever meant to. But I can't be part of this mess. I can't share you, not like that. You need to choose, him or me, or neither. But I can't keep doing this halfway." His words cut deeper than I expected, a blade of truth slicing through the fog I'd been lost in. I wanted to tell him I'd choose him, that I'd leave everything behind for the way he made me feel, but the weight of my betrayal choked me. I mumbled something incoherent, a weak promise to figure it out, and hung up before I could say more. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the edge of my bed, the house silent around me, and stared at that wedding ring again. It felt heavier than ever, a symbol of a life I'd broken beyond repair. At some point, I got up and started packing a small bag. Just a few clothes, a toothbrush, nothing permanent. I didn't know if I was leaving for good or just escaping for a night, but the act of folding those shirts, of zipping up that bag, felt like a quiet rebellion against the chaos I'd created. I stood there in the dim light of our bedroom, the bag at my feet, and wondered if this was what freedom felt like, or if it was just another kind of cage. The final confrontation with Daniel came a few, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.